So for the Neighborhood Food Network part of the call, before Megan comes on, I want to share about this Sustainable Regenerative Growers Workshop series that's coming up. And it's on Saturday, October 22nd. And it's with Nigel Palmer. He is a author of the Regenerative Growers Guide to Garden Amendments. And I don't know if this is exciting to other people, but it was exciting to me to learn that you can amend the soil in your garden through things that you have in your garden right now. This is for small farmers. It's not for Mark Dudla. He's not going to be doing this, but you can grab your weeds after you mow your lawn. You can grab your tomato plants, any of your extra weeds or not weeds, but your actual plants that you are pulling up right now to prepare your garden for the next spring season. And you can just put those in a bucket and let them sit for 6 weeks. And you can use them for fertilizer. Like the plants that you're growing can become fertilizer for next year's plants. Isn't that awesome? You don't have to buy fertilizer. This is total food freedom. When you save your own seeds, you make your own fertilizer, you make your own compost, you take leaves from trees that are falling around. You don't have to go to stores and buy tons of expensive fertilizers. So this guy shares all these different methods. And he also uses eggshells and fish bones. So after you eat fish, you can keep the bones. You can make those into wonderful fertilizer, and all kinds of weeds and different plants. And he tells you how to make your own vinegars. So check out his series. This is Nigel Palmer.
I was looking at his thing, and you have to pay for it, I believe. But you can also get his book.
You can also get his book. His book is not very expensive. And yes, Nigel does mention using human urine as a fertilizer. The nitrogen in it does work. Yes. Somebody's shaking her head and saying, wow. Yeah. A lot of people do actually. They use human urine.
I did it. I did it.
And if you make biochar, by the way, if you are into that, you just, when you make a campfire, you put it out before it becomes ash. You wait till it becomes black and charred, and then you can use the biochar in your garden. You crush it up, but you have to, I don't know how you call it. You have to inject it with nutrients before you use that biochar in your garden, and a good way to do that is to have your kids pee on it. That's one thing that they can do. And so the nutrients have to go into the charcoal. Otherwise, the charcoal, when you put it into the biochar, when you put it in the garden, will absorb nutrients away from your plants, right? It's like sponges, like little tiny holes, and they absorb nutrients. So if you put the biochar, so after a campfire, or you have to put it out before it gets ashy though. You take the biochar and you put it in a bucket or something, and you can add compost in there. You can add, urine in there. Any of those nutrients that you put in there will stay there, and the biochar will stay in the ground for 1,000 years. So it's a way better nutrient amendment than just putting mulch on top of a garden, where it will compress and degrade and go down, and all that carbon leaves the mulch. So instead, you've got carbon that's in the soil. It's staying there for 1,000 years, and you've infused it. I think that's a word, infused it with nutrients like nitrogen and, other things from your compost. Sorry, Frankie, now I'm telling you. Yeah. So, but you can still add in nutrients. And if you add in nutrients to that soil, that the biochar will absorb it, and, it will stay in there. Mark, I saw you nodding. Do you want to add anything to this about biochar and nutrients in the soil?
Oh, I completely agree with what you said. Just be careful if you're not a very clean diet. You're going to have glyphosate in your urine.
Yes.
We've always wanted to test our dogs, because we notice where our dogs urinate. One is there can be a high degree of urea and other things in there that can kill your lawn. But part of it's also the glyphosate that we're not thinking about, that is also killing your lawn. So
that's absolutely right. We've seen that with multiple, and glyphosate has been found in dog food. So this is only a suggestion for people who eat organic. Yeah.
So, and this is another thing that like a neighbor was mowing their lawn and he was putting all of his grass into plastic bags. So I went over there and I said, what are you doing? He goes, I'm taking it to the dump. And I said, do you spray your lawn at all? He goes, oh God, no, I do not spray at all. And I said, great, give me all your grass. So you gotta ask them.
And what did you do with all his grass, Ann?
I composted it. Actually, I built 2 new beds and I put like sticks and twigs and like a hugelkultur type thing in the bottom of the bed. And then I put the grass clippings over on top of that. And then I was throwing in some compost. And then I finally ended up putting in and planting it. And that bed actually did very well. So
can I ask a question of Mark? Mark, you're our stand-in expert tonight, I guess, because Megan didn't come on. So I hope you don't mind. So when you have grass clippings like that, if somebody has waited until sort of the end of the season where there's a whole bunch of seeds on the grass, is that a bad idea to put that grass in your garden then, or compost?
Well, you can always take some of that compost and sprout it in the spring or before you apply it to your beds to see what kind of weed seed bank you have in it.
How would you sprout it? What does that mean, sprout it?
Put it in a paper towel, keep it moist, see what grows, see what germinates. So compost, if it's done correctly, or if it's certainly certified compost, gets to at least 160 degrees, which sterilizes many pathogens, microbes, and weed seeds. So I'm not a proponent of throwing it away, but if you don't do a good job of composting, which I can understand why, right? It's a fairly physically intensive process, and you need to have thermometers and alarms, and you need to check your compost, right? It's almost like baking a cake. If you take it out at the wrong time, too early or too late, it's not cake anymore. So compost is much the same way. So if you're vigilant, by all means, I don't have an issue with putting weed seeds in. If you're just kind of a part-time composter and you're going to use whatever you have in the spring, maybe you don't want to put all the weed seeds in if it hasn't gotten up to temperature.
So it's important to have a compost thermometer in order to make sure that you're killing off the weed seeds and the fungus and all of that. Okay, so that's something on the to-do list, because I definitely do not have, and that's the ones that are really long, right?
Also, and I think we might have mentioned this in the last meeting, but I think it bears mentioning again that people were concerned about powdery mildew and stuff, and I was reading that powdery mildew can't survive without a living host, and that it's okay to compost it. Is that right, Mark?
As far as I know, as long as we bring these things up to temperature, that's the sterilization process we need. If you have outside edges of your compost pile that's not getting to 160, you probably have live inoculum that if you then spread that on your garden is going to have those same diseases. So it's all about the quality of the job that you do while composting. That's why when we buy compost, a lot of times we buy certified compost, and you don't need a lot, right? We inoculate our manure with it and put manure and compost together into our farm fields.
Okay, so you do not need a lot of, how much, what do you mean by that? You don't need a lot of compost?
Well, we did a study.
Let's just say we're preparing our gardens for next year, right? We want to put a layer of compost now, this fall season, right? How thick of a layer of compost do we want to put over the garden?
Well, if it's just compost, then, you could put on as much as 1/4 of an inch, on the top side, but we are putting literally 200 to 400 pounds per 43,560 square feet, which is 1 acre.
Right.
And we use it as an inoculum, right? We inoculate our soil with compost, but we're also putting on manures. We're also tilling in green manure. We're doing all of those things simultaneously. If compost is mainly your only form of nutrition and you don't have cover crops, then certainly you can go thicker with it. You bet.
Okay. And somebody asked about coffee grounds. Are those too acidic Was that question to add about composting, or was that question about adding it to the biochar? Annie, do you want to unmute and clarify that?
That was like the biochar. Is that, can you?
Yeah. Do you know, Mark, can you add coffee grounds to biochar?
Specifically, I'm not sure about coffee grounds, but you're absolutely right in what you said, that, you know, biochar out of the burn pit, you know, it's high in certainly, you know, potassium, but, you know, it lacks a lot of the other nutrients. So it's very important to charge it with micronutrients. And it's a black carbon source that is highly stable. So it will last hundreds of years in your soil compared to the green carbon like grass clippings, or the brown carbon like sweet corn stalks or things like that, that rapidly degrade and will gas off and produce that cycle, right? That CO2 cycle and the carbon cycle, which is absolutely normal. But biochar is in a much more stable form and will give back very slowly. It spoon feeds your soil for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
That's awesome.
So
yeah. You can buy it from your local store, or you can just have a campfire and pour water over the logs and the sticks before they get ashy. When they're nice and, you know, just black and crumbly, pour water over it and then set them aside. And then you can crush them up and make biochar. It's, you know, practically free. So yeah. Okay.
So did you see Jody's question?
What's Jody's question? I gotta scroll down. I want to sheet mulch my urban curbside strip with straw, but when I asked around, none of it was organic. Yes, that's a problem. Isn't that dangerous for glyphosate use, etc.? Should I use organic hay instead? But hay has a lot of seeds in it. I thought there is organic hay available though. You're thinking exactly correctly. Yes, there's
other chemicals too besides glyphosate
and others. Yeah, and other chemicals. So you really just need to source. You just need to keep asking around and finding somebody. Usually, small farmers will not spray glyphosate on their straw.
Yeah,
can you answer that question, Mark, though, about the hay with the seed?
Alfalfa, if it's alfalfa based and it's from an organic farm, that would be very rich in protein, which is also very rich then in nitrogen. So the more alfalfa, the higher, the lower the carbon to nitrogen ratio, which would go into your soil solution quite quickly. It would be decomposed. If it's just grass, that's going to have a much higher carbon ratio. You know, not like a woody tree, but partway there, and it's going to take longer to degrade. So that's what's so effective about crimped cereal rye. When you leave that on the surface, it doesn't automatically decompose, and it gives you this mulch layer of season-long control of weeds and preventing, you know, soil splash and giving you a nice mat to even walk on. And I really hope, my goal is, I really want to make 100 of those crimpers for you guys to use. I don't know.
So generous, Mark.
I don't know what it's at, but if we can't
it's at
get
4
to 100,
right now. So guys,
wrong.
here, I'll put the link on our website to the page where you guys can sign up for these crimpers.
So what he wants you to do is to buy cereal rye from your local hardware store or gardener store and plant it in your garden beds now, so that over the fall and the winter, you will be putting nutrients into your garden beds. And then in the spring, you'll use his handy dandy crimper that he's going to make for you and send to you. You just pay him for shipping. And you just then push down the cereal rye and you have your free mulch and you plant into that. So this is leveling up, folks. This is not just gardening for, you know, your grandma. This is leveling up. You are then using, this is regenerative organic, you know, gardening.
Yeah.
So
Mark,
yeah.
I just cleaned up a bunch of beds. Can I get that cereal rye right now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're still planting rye every day, and we will probably till the end of November. And we're in Wisconsin. So there's no excuse for you guys that are south of Wisconsin for not getting cereal rye in a small portion of your garden. Don't do the whole thing. Just take an eighth or a quarter of it and spread it.
Yes. And Melissa, this is only for empty beds. Yeah. Empty beds. Your beds that you don't have, but hopefully you have some beds that aren't empty, because you could be growing kale right now and all kinds of greens. Spinach, Malabar spinach is a gift that keeps on giving. We planted it in this. It's been growing all summer. It's growing now again in the fall. It's amazing. So yeah, there's a lot of greens that you can be growing right now.
If there's anything that's about to be harvested, just spread the rye right over the top of it, or between it, or underneath it. It'll do just fine, because by the time you harvest your crop, that rye will be up and growing, and you can then choose to remove that plant or run a lawnmower over it, or however you recycle or compost, and then your rye's there, right? It's ready to go.
Yeah.
So you might have some holes in it, where your plants were, but even Anne, with her less than perfect seed spreading, has some holes in hers too, but hers,
my
looks
seed
really nice.
Spreading was perfect. It was the squirrel's fault.
Darn squirrels.
Yeah. And you don't have to have thousands and thousands of square feet to do this. It can just be in your garden bed. Oh, hi, Megan.
Hi, I'm sorry I'm late. Yeah, I got stuck in a work meeting. I'm on Pacific time, so it's still work hours.
So she's with the Creative Vegetable Gardener. We've had her on before, and we love her. And she is from Madison, Wisconsin by me, but she is now in Arizona, right?
Just for the winter. Yeah. I actually planted some things for the first time ever in my life besides garlic, in October. So it's fun.
So, okay.
Great.
So yeah, we were going to be talking about, I'll put the link to her website, because it's a great website. She's got several really great books, and she had done a talk with us previously about things that we can do in the winter and things that she had done, but I kind of would like to go over that, since the weather, it's really cold here, just so you know, Megan.
I know, I looked at the weather.
We've been getting frost every night. So, all right, well.
So we got 10 minutes with you, and we would love to cover, I guess the topic you were going to be covering tonight is just what to do in your cold climates, right? Right now.
Yeah, are there people from warm climates, or is everybody from cold climate? Everybody's from cold.
I think, don't we have some people here from California? I think most of these people are more. We have some California people here too.
Yeah, so I am, like Ann said, mostly a cold climate gardener, although I am in Arizona right now. So in the cold climate garden, I would say this time of year I'm planting garlic. Well, and actually if it's a cold fall, then I would plant it now. I generally wait until towards the end of October, because I've had it sprout. With climate change, things have been warmer in Wisconsin, so I have pushed back my garlic planting. I mulch all my beds. So you guys were talking about cover crop. That's a great way to have a living mulch. I usually have a whole bunch of, I like marsh hay, but marsh or straw. Hay or straw, and I go through and add another layer of mulch over my entire garden, any bed that doesn't have anything growing in it.
So what about leaves, fall leaves? Because I mulch mine up. I mulch the leaves up, and then I put them on, and my soil was fantastic this spring.
Yeah, leaves you can do as well. I find leaves break down really quickly. So you might, if you do leaves in the fall, you might want to check again in the spring and put some more mulch on top, maybe more leaves or more hay or straw. I like to pretty much never see any soil in my garden, except if I'm waiting for seeds to germinate. So I keep everything very well covered. That'll insulate the soil a little bit from, the desiccation of winter. We have a lot of winter winds, and it can be really cold, and there's a lot of freezing and thawing. So that's one big thing that I do. And it keeps down the spring weeds, because the weeds start early in the spring once things warm up. But
so Danielle was asking if the garlic, will it die if it sprouts before? It'll come back, won't it?
No, it's fine if it sprouts, but I personally don't want it to be sprout. I just don't like it to sprout in the fall. It'll just die back and it'll sprout again in the spring. But I always think I don't want it to use any energy in the fall sprouting because it's just gonna have to re-sprout in the spring. But yeah, it'll be fine. It's not that big of a deal. It happens. Sometimes you plant it and then there's a freak warm up. But I plant my garlic and then I mulch it really heavily.
And you mulch it with, do you mulch it with straw?
I prefer marsh hay because I have a source where I live, but you can do
marsh
hay or straw.
Okay.
You just want to be careful of your source, of course, always when you're bringing in anything from outside your garden, outside your land. You want to just make sure that you're not getting hay or straw that has weed seed in it, or then you're populating your garden with new weeds.
So Danielle Rebecca wants to know if you can use wood chips over garlic, or is that too thick?
Yeah, I do not like to use wood chips on my vegetable garden beds. I use it in my aisles. So wood chips are very they have a lot of carbon. And when carbon gets mixed into the soil, it does tie up some nitrogen while it breaks down. So I have noticed in my garden, even if I mulch a garden bed full of annual flowers with wood chips, sometimes they don't do that well because there's not enough nitrogen. So I like to keep the wood chips in the paths. So a lot of times people will challenge me and say, well, it's not an issue if the wood chips are on the surface of the soil, which is true, but I don't know how you could just keep things on the surface of the soil and not mix them in. Everything gets mixed in eventually,
and they break down. So
they break down, and they temporarily tie up nitrogen while they're breaking down, and then they do release it again. But I found that sometimes it makes things a little chlorotic because vegetables like a lot of nitrogen in general. But you can always do an experiment. Everybody has to figure out what works for them in their garden. So you could mulch some of your garlic with wood chips and some with hay or straw or leaves and see if you notice a difference.
I compost with wood chips as a layer, as a carbon layer. And then and they say I don't have to do it, but I sift the compost. So all the wood chips I'll use on the border of something.
Right.
Why? I don't understand why messages.
Can you answer? Danielle asked, do you use cardboard over new areas to kill the grass and weeds, and then wood chips over that? Yes, right.
Yeah, you can do that. I've done that a lot for new perennial beds, or if I want to plant a tree next year. Again, I wouldn't personally plant vegetables into wood chips, but you could use the wood chips and the cardboard to kill everything, and then you could scrape some of the wood chips into the aisles and use something else for the beds.
Can I ask a question real quick? So my sons are resistant, of course, to garden work now because they have so many other fun things to do. And I asked them to pull up the tomato plants, right, and put them in compost. And there's a lot of weeds. We didn't weed for a while. And they're like, Mom, can't the weeds just be mulch? Why do we have to pull them up?
Yeah, I think it depends on what kind of weeds they are, right? If they're going to come back in some weeds are just annual and they can't survive the winter and then they'll just die back. So that's fine. If it's anything that's a perennial weed, as soon as it warms up in the spring, they're just going to start growing again.
Right. Okay.
So it kind of depends on
preventative. To pull them out. Okay.
You
but
can
it's
always
better
wait until spring and see what's starting to sprout and then rip those out if you don't have time to do it in the fall.
But it's better to pull them up and put mulch down.
Yeah, but if you're short on time and your sons don't want to weed, at the very least, you could just cover it all with a thick layer of mulch. And then if there's some stubborn perennial weeds like dandelion, that'll come up through the mulch, and then you can just deal with it in spring. So I would say, if you're short on time in the fall and you don't have time to weed everything, just put a thick layer of mulch down on top of things and sort it out in the spring.
Okay.
So I've been yanking weeds up when I see them, and I just lay them down on the bed so the roots will die, and then they can go back to feed the soil.
Yeah, you can do that. I've done that as well. So So yeah, I mean, I pull out definitely any diseased plants, and I try to pull out of my garden. I have a perennial flower garden that borders my vegetable garden. And I actually leave all my perennials up because if you read about it, there's a lot of insects that overwinter. There's birds that come and will eat the seeds, and I like a little interest. So you don't necessarily have to cut down your perennial garden. You can leave it up, and then I just cut it down in the spring when it warms up. But my vegetable garden, I do tend to tidy up quite a bit. I like to get all the plants, anything that's not producing anymore, I get it out. I have a lot of tomato disease, so I actually don't even put my tomato plants in my compost bin. I just put them on the curb for the leaf waste. They come by and
wait, why do you do that? Is there a reason why you don't put them in the compost?
I have a lot of tomato disease. So
tomato disease?
Yeah. Diseases okay. On my tomato plants.
Oh,
so yeah. I don't monitor my compost bin in a way that it gets hot enough to kill diseases. And so I put them on the curb.
Oh boy. Okay.
And do you rotate? Do you rotate where you plant your tomatoes every year, like we're supposed to?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. I rotate everything, but I mean, tomato disease is kind of part of gardening in Wisconsin, at least my area of Wisconsin. I never see tomatoes that don't have lots of different soil-borne diseases. So yeah. And then, you know, if I put row cover and greenhouse plastic over things, I make some low tunnels. I have a cold frame. So I like to try to, even the cold hardy things, Wisconsin gets pretty cold for those of you who live there. So, you know, even if things are cold hardy and frost hardy, they will start to die as it gets lower and lower, the temperature. So I set up some low tunnels and row cover and try to get things to go as long as possible in my garden. So that's another fall thing I do, kind of preparing for the winter. Generally, I harvest out of my garden until about December 10th or so. And then usually in Wisconsin, it's starting to get pretty cold. The ground's starting to freeze. And then I usually harvest most of the things that I have left. I overwinter my spinach, but almost everything else comes out in December. But you can get things to go pretty long.
I've had terrible time growing spinach in Wisconsin, but I keep trying.
Yeah, I have noticed that it's gotten harder because you plant it in August usually if you want a good harvest, but our Augusts are a lot hotter, I feel like, than they were 20 years ago. And so I've been having germination issues. I don't know if that's what the issue that you've been having, Anne.
Yes.
But the soil is too warm. It's too hot out, and it's
okay. So is it better to plant in September then?
Yeah, I mean, you can plant in September. The spinach won't get as big for fall harvest, but then it'll regrow again in the spring in March or so. So I did that last year. I replanted again in September because I had bad germination in August, and then I got a pretty good spring crop. So it's
great. Great. Well, I'm sorry, but it's 8:02 now, and we said we'd go to 8 tonight. We may have a longer call in a couple of weeks. Next week, I'm going to be at the Weston A. Price Foundation. Thank you, Megan. Thank you.
That was useful, thanks for coming on, and yes, enjoy the warm weather.
Yes, I apologize I was late.
Thank you so much. And so next weekend, I'm going to be at the Weston A. Price Foundation Wise Traditions Conference and the Children's Health Defense Conference. And the Children's Health Defense is all day on Monday, and they have an evening session. So I will not be on the call next week. Oh, Danielle, you'll be there. Great. So if anybody wants to come and volunteer at the booth, it is so fun to volunteer at the Moms Across America booth because you get to meet all these cool people and you will learn something. I promise you, you will learn something from the people who come by and share. And we'll share with them. I don't know if it'll be live streamed or not, but my guess is they would at least make the talks available, you know, maybe not live, but afterwards.
So
we will live stream it though.
We will be having the Neighborhood Food Network call though next Monday, because I'm going to have a woman on that I met at my foraging function, and she's going to be talking about us making fire cider and things we can do for our health for the winter. So we will be having the Neighborhood Food Network call. I'll be
great. Okay, Anne will be hosting that, and so we will not have the Moms Across America call because I can't be in two places at once. So I'll miss you, but I will be reporting on it. Look for, so it will probably not be on YouTube. If we can figure out how to do Rumble, we had a lot of problems with that for the Washington DC, event, but we'll email people. We'll email people if we can get it up onto, on videos. Okay, but I'll definitely be doing some interviews with people. Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you, Mark Dudla, for being our, stand-in expert. You always give us brilliant advice. And thank you everybody for Gary for contributing, and Anne, and everybody else, Frankie, and everybody who contributed on the call. We appreciate you so much. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good night. Great to see you. Thank you.